Every single morning he walked through those gates alone. Not because he had no one. Not because the world had forgotten him. But because his father had made a decision, a deliberate and considered decision, that his son was going to learn something that money could not teach and that comfort could not produce, and that the specific environment of Whitmore Academy, one of the most expensive private schools in the state of Connecticut, was going to provide in a way that his father had calculated very carefully before enrolling him. The decision was this. His son was going to attend one of the best academic institutions in the country. He was going to do it on a scholarship that he had earned entirely through his own intelligence and his own work. He was going to go to that school with the clothes he had and the bag he had and the lunch he packed himself, and he was going to sit in those classrooms and learn what those classrooms had to offer. And he was not going to tell a single person who his father was. For 2 years that decision had held. For 2 years the boy had walked through those gates every morning alone and had sat at the lunch table alone and had endured what he endured in the specific silence of someone who has been told by the person they trust most in the world that the enduring is the lesson and that the lesson is worth it. Until the morning a black car pulled up to the front of Whitmore Academy and a man stepped out, and the 2 years of silence ended in the specific way that long silences end when they are finally broken by the truth. Stay with me. Because what that man said when he got out of that car, and what it revealed about the boy that every student in that school had spent 2 years looking through rather than at, is a story about what we see when we look at people and what we miss when we only look at the surface. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And if you are new here, click the subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now let us get into this story properly. His name was Marcus Cole, and he was 16 years old, and he was, by every academic measure available to the teachers and administrators of Whitmore Academy, one of the most genuinely intelligent students the school had enrolled in a decade. His mathematics teacher, a woman named Mrs. Harrington, who had been teaching at Whitmore for 22 years and who had the specific quality of someone who had seen enough students in 2 decades to know the difference between a student who was performing intelligence and a student who was operating from it, had written in his first semester review that Marcus Cole had a quality of mathematical intuition that she encountered perhaps once every several years, and that the school was fortunate to have him on the scholarship program. His English teacher had written that his analytical writing had a maturity of thought that went beyond his age and that suggested he had been raised in an environment where ideas were taken seriously and discussed honestly. His history teacher had written that his class contributions were the most consistently substantive of any student in the room. These were the things that the teachers wrote about Marcus Cole in the private documents that his academic record contained, and that his classmates never saw and would not have believed if they had seen them, because the Marcus Cole that his classmates saw was not the Marcus Cole that his teachers wrote about in those documents. The Marcus Cole that his classmates saw was the quiet boy in the corner with the worn sneakers and the generic backpack that had a small tear in the left strap that he had repaired with a piece of duct tape that was visible if you looked at it, and that several of his classmates had looked at with the specific contemptuous attention that teenagers bring to the evidence of other people's financial limitations. He was the boy who ate the lunch he brought from home in a paper bag while the other students ordered from the school's catering service that offered 3 options daily and that produced the specific smell of expensive school food, something between a good restaurant and a cafeteria, that Marcus associated with the sound of conversations he was not part of. He was the boy who was picked up after school by public transit, walking the 3 blocks to the bus stop in the afternoon while his classmates were collected by cars that cost more than most people's annual salaries. He was the boy who, when the conversation in the classroom or the hallway turned to the places people had been over the summer or the things they were doing on the weekends, went quiet in the way of someone who has learned that the honest answer to those questions produces reactions that are not worth managing. The school was Whitmore Academy in Hartford, Connecticut, and it had been producing graduates who went to Ivy League universities and into the kinds of careers that required knowing the right people and having the right background since 1887. The annual tuition was $64,000, which excluded the fees for the various programs and activities and trips that the school offered throughout the year and that were described in the materials as optional but that were experienced by the students who did not participate in them as anything but. Marcus was there on the Whitmore Excellence Scholarship, a full academic scholarship that covered tuition and a basic materials allowance, and that was awarded each year to 2 incoming students who had demonstrated exceptional academic ability through a competitive process that involved written examinations, teacher recommendations, and a personal interview with a scholarship committee. Marcus had scored the highest combined result in the history of the scholarship examination. The scholarship committee member who had interviewed him had told his father afterward that she had been doing scholarship interviews for 11 years and that Marcus was the most self-possessed 16-year-old she had ever sat across from and that she hoped the school understood what it was receiving. His father had thanked her and had said he thought they would come to understand it in time. He had said it with the quiet confidence of a man who had already thought about what time would produce and was satisfied with the projection. The group that made Marcus's daily experience of Whitmore most difficult was organized, as these groups typically are in schools of this kind, around the boy who had the most and knew it most completely. His name was Tyler Ashford and he was the son of Richard Ashford, who was the founder and chief executive of Ashford Partners, a private equity firm that managed $12 billion of assets and whose name was on the business school building of a university in Boston and on a performing arts center in Hartford. Tyler Ashford was 17 years old and had the specific quality of someone who had been told from early childhood that the world was organized around people like him and who had therefore never had occasion to question the organization. He was not a stupid boy. He was actually reasonably intelligent, which made the things he said and did more deliberate than the things stupid boys said and did, which gave them a different quality of damage. He had identified Marcus in the first week of the school year, the way that boys like Tyler identify boys like Marcus, through the specific social radar that privilege develops in people who have been raised in environments where the markers of financial position are used to sort people into categories before anything else about them is known. He had seen the worn sneakers and the duct-taped backpack and the paper bag lunch and he had reached a conclusion and he had communicated the conclusion to the people around him in the way that social leaders in those environments communicate conclusions, not through a declaration but through a series of small signals, a look, a turned shoulder, a specific quality of laughter directed at a specific target, that the people around him read and responded to because reading and responding to those signals was how you maintained your position in the group. For 2 years Marcus had been the target of Tyler Ashford's particular kind of attention. It had started with small things, comments about his sneakers, questions about his lunch asked with the performed curiosity of someone who already knows the answer and is asking in order to produce the answer in public where the answer could be heard by the people who were supposed to hear it. It had progressed to the specific escalations that small things progress to when they are allowed to continue without consequence. Tyler had on one occasion taken Marcus's paper bag lunch from the table and examined its contents in front of his group with the performed anthropological interest of someone encountering the customs of a foreign and inferior culture, commenting on each item with the specific humor of someone who understands that the cruelty of the performance is deniable as long as it is presented as a joke. Marcus had sat at the table and had not said anything. He had looked at Tyler Ashford with the specific quality of someone who is making a decision not to respond and who understands that the decision is its own kind of response, one that Tyler Ashford did not know how to read and that had therefore unsettled him in ways that the visible reactions of other targets had not. I want to ask you something before we continue. If you had been in Marcus Cole's position, sitting at that lunch table while someone performed the contents of your lunch for their friends, what would you have done? Would you have said something? Would you have walked away? Would you have sat exactly where you were the way Marcus did and looked at the person doing it with the specific quality of someone who has decided something and is not going to be moved from the decision? Tell us in the comments, because the choice Marcus made every single day in that school for 2 years was not the choice of someone who did not know how to respond. It was the choice of someone who had been taught something about response that Tyler Ashford had never been taught and that the 2 years were in the process of demonstrating in ways that Tyler Ashford was not yet equipped to understand. The thing that crossed the line happened on a Tuesday in November of Marcus's second year at Whitmore. It happened at lunch in the dining hall, in front of approximately 40 students and 2 faculty supervisors who were at the far end of the room and who did not see the beginning of what happened. Tyler had come to Marcus's table with 2 of the boys who were consistently in his orbit and he had stood at the table and he had begun with the usual material and then he had said something that was different from the usual material in the specific way that things are different when they cross from general contempt into personal attack. He had said something about Marcus's mother. He had heard from somewhere, the way boys in schools like Whitmore heard things about the students on scholarships, that Marcus's mother had left when he was young and he had used this information with the specific cruelty of someone who has identified the available wound and has decided to use it. He had said it with the performed casualness of someone who is making a joke and who wants the people around him to know it is a joke so that the response to it is also performed as a response to a joke rather than a response to what it actually was. Marcus did not move. He looked at Tyler Ashford and he did not move. He did not speak. He did not stand. He looked at Tyler Ashford with the full and complete attention of someone who has heard every word and has understood every word and has made a decision that is visible in the quality of the attention even if the decision itself is not yet visible in any action. Tyler Ashford had expected any number of responses. He had not expected this one. He did not know what to do with this one. He tried a second comment and Marcus looked at him with the same quality of attention and said nothing, and Tyler Ashford found, in the specific discomfort of someone whose social power is predicated on producing reactions and who is not producing the reaction he needs, that the silence was more uncomfortable than anything Marcus could have said. He walked away with his group and the performance of having made his point, and Marcus sat at the table and finished his lunch, and in the afternoon he sent his father a text message that said today was a hard day. His father had replied within 3 minutes. He had said, I am proud of you. He had said, hold on. Marcus had looked at the text and had put his phone in his pocket and had gone to his next class. His father's name was James Cole and he was 51 years old, and he was, in the specific world that measured these things, one of the most successful self-made businessmen in New England. He had been born in Hartford, Connecticut, in 1973, the son of a postal worker and a home health aide, and he had grown up in the north end of the city in the specific circumstances of a family that had enough for dignity and not enough for anything beyond it, which was the circumstance that his father had told him was the best possible starting point for a life of genuine achievement, because it was close enough to difficulty to understand what difficulty required and far enough from despair to believe that something else was possible. He had attended Hartford public schools and had graduated with academic results that earned him a partial scholarship to the University of Connecticut, where he had studied economics and had worked 2 part-time jobs throughout, and had graduated with honors and had gone directly into a position at a small investment firm where his analytical intelligence had been recognized within the first year by a senior partner who had spent 30 years knowing talent when he encountered it and who had given James Cole the specific opportunity of being given real work to do rather than the peripheral work that new analysts were typically given. James had done the real work at the level that real work done by the right person produced, and by 35 he had made partner, and by 42 he had founded his own firm, Cole Capital Management, which managed $7 billion of assets and employed 43 people in its Hartford office, and which had in the previous year been profiled in the Wall Street Journal in a piece about the next generation of self-made investment managers in America. He had raised Marcus alone from the age of 4 when Marcus's mother had made the decision that the life she was living was not the life she wanted, and had left in the specific way that some people leave when they have decided that staying is impossible, which was to say she had left completely and had not maintained a presence in Marcus's life in any sustained way after leaving. James had not made this decision defining for his son. He had told Marcus the truth about his mother when Marcus was old enough to understand the truth, which was that she had needed to find something she had not found in their life together, and that her leaving was not a statement about Marcus's worth but about her own limits. And he had said this with the specific honesty of someone who had processed his own feelings about it fully enough to speak about it without those feelings distorting the telling. He had then raised Marcus with the full and complete attention of a father who had decided that his son was going to understand something about the world that money could not give him, and that the giving of it was his most important responsibility. The decision to send Marcus to Whitmore on a scholarship he earned himself, without telling anyone who his father was, had been the most concentrated expression of that responsibility. He had told Marcus what he was doing and why. He had told him that the 2 years were going to be difficult. He had told him that the difficulty was the point. He had said the world was full of people who had been given everything and who had not been required to earn the understanding of what they had, and that a man who had earned his understanding of what he had was a different kind of man from a man who had simply received it. He had said he wanted Marcus to be the first kind of man. Marcus had said he understood. He had said he would try. His father had said trying was not the assignment. He had said doing it was the assignment, and that he trusted him to do it. Now I need to pause here because I want you to think about what James Cole did when he decided to send his son to that school that way. He had the resources to buy his son the most comfortable possible version of that education. He had the name and the relationships to ensure that his son was received at Whitmore with the specific deference that institutions show to the children of powerful donors. He chose not to do any of that. He chose to send his son in through the scholarship door with the worn sneakers and the paper bag lunch and the duct-taped backpack, and let the school experience him the way the school experienced scholarship students, and see what the school produced in response. Think about what it takes to make that decision as a father. Think about what it takes to know that your son is sitting in a dining hall being mocked by the children of people who have less intelligence and less genuine achievement than you do, and to hold the decision. Think about what James Cole must have felt on the evenings when Marcus texted him that it had been a hard day. Tell us in the comments what you think about James Cole's decision. Tell us whether you think he was right. Tell us whether you would have done the same. We want to know what you are thinking right now. The morning the black car pulled up was the Wednesday after the Tuesday of the lunch hall incident. James Cole had spent Tuesday evening and Wednesday morning thinking about the decision he was about to make and whether it was the right moment to make it and what the making of it would produce. He had always known the 2 years would end at some point. He had not known exactly what would end them. When Marcus had texted him on Tuesday about the hard day and he had texted back and then called in the evening and Marcus had told him everything that had been said, including the specific thing that Tyler Ashford had said about his mother, James had sat in his study in his house in the West Hartford neighborhood where he lived in a house that was substantial and quiet and that most people who drove past would have correctly identified as the house of someone with serious money, and he had thought about his son sitting in that dining hall and not moving and not speaking and looking at Tyler Ashford with the quality of attention that he had raised him to have, and he had felt the full complexity of what he felt, the pride and the grief and the anger, and he had held all of it for a long time before he had made the call. He had made the call to the headmaster of Whitmore Academy at 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning. The headmaster's name was Dr. Robert Calloway, and he had been running Whitmore for 9 years with the specific careful competence of someone who understood that his primary constituency was the parents of the students who paid $64,000 a year and who had therefore developed the particular skill of managing the expectations and the concerns of very powerful people with the specific diplomacy that very powerful people required. When James Cole called him at 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning and said his name and said he was the father of Marcus Cole, the scholarship student, and that he would be coming to the school that morning and would like a meeting, Dr. Calloway had said of course and had asked what the meeting concerned, and James had said it concerned the environment his son had been experiencing at the school for 2 years and that he would explain the details when he arrived. Dr. Calloway had put the phone down and had sat at his desk for a moment and had then called his assistant and said to hold his 9 o'clock and reschedule his 10 o'clock and to prepare the main conference room. The black car arrived at Whitmore Academy at 8:55 on a Wednesday morning. It was not a limousine. It was not showy in the way of people who use their vehicles to communicate their position. It was a black sedan that was expensive in the specific understated way of expensive things that do not announce themselves and that therefore communicated more about their owner than a flashier choice would have. James Cole stepped out. He was 51 years old and he was dressed in a suit that had been made for him by a tailor in New York and that fit him in the specific way that made-to-measure suits fit people who have spent enough time in them to know what they needed, with the ease of something that belonged rather than the stiffness of something being worn for effect. He was 6 feet 2 and had the physical presence of someone who had started life in circumstances that built physical discipline and who had maintained that discipline across 51 years. He walked toward the entrance of Whitmore Academy with the specific quality of someone who has made a decision and is implementing it and who is entirely at ease with both the decision and the implementation. Several students saw him arrive. Tyler Ashford and 2 members of his group were in the front courtyard at that hour, which was the period between the end of morning assembly and the beginning of first class, and they saw the car and they saw the man who stepped out of it and they looked at each other with the specific expression of people who are reassessing something in real time. They did not know who he was. They knew the quality of what they were seeing, the car and the suit and the manner and the way the man walked, and they knew from those things that whoever he was not what they had assumed Marcus Cole's father was, which was the assumption they had made without ever meeting or seeing Marcus Cole's father, the assumption that the worn sneakers and the paper bag lunch and the duct-taped backpack had told them was a safe assumption to make. They watched him walk through the entrance and they did not say anything to each other. James was met at the entrance by Dr. Calloway's assistant and was shown to the main conference room where Dr. Calloway was waiting along with the vice principal of student affairs, a woman named Ms. Davidson, and the head of the scholarship program, a man named Mr. Peters who had overseen Marcus's admission and who had maintained a relationship with James across the 2 years through the standard communications of the scholarship program. They shook hands. They sat. James opened his laptop and he placed it on the conference table and he said he was going to show them something before he said anything and he would like them to watch it without speaking until it was finished. He had a compilation of video footage. Some of it was from Marcus's phone, recorded on days when the incidents had occurred. Some of it was from the school's own security cameras, footage that he had obtained through a formal records request 2 weeks prior, before the Tuesday incident, because he had been building the picture for some time and had wanted the full picture in his possession before he brought it to the school. The footage ran for 12 minutes. It showed the specific pattern of what had been happening to Marcus for 2 years in the specific and documented way that footage of things that have been happening shows when the things have been happening consistently enough to be on multiple recordings on multiple dates across multiple locations. It showed Tyler Ashford and it showed the group around him and it showed Marcus sitting in the specific stillness of someone who has decided what his response to this is going to be every single time. Dr. Calloway watched the 12 minutes without speaking. Ms. Davidson watched it. Mr. Peters watched it. When it finished, James closed the laptop and he said he was going to tell them some things. He said first that his son had the strongest academic record of any student in his year and possibly of any scholarship student in the school's history, and that this was a fact they were already in possession of, and that he was raising it because the contrast between what the academic record said about his son and what the school environment had been providing for his son for 2 years was a contrast that the school needed to sit with. He said second that what the footage showed was not the behavior of individual students acting without social sanction but the behavior of a social system within the school that had been allowed to operate without adequate supervision or consequence, and that the school's responsibility for that social system was something he intended to discuss in detail. He said third that he was James Cole, the founder and managing partner of Cole Capital Management, and that he was telling them this not as a threat and not as a performance of his own position but because the school had been operating on an assumption about who Marcus Cole was, and he wanted the assumption corrected and the correction to come from him directly rather than from any other source. He said he had chosen to have his son attend this school on a scholarship he earned himself without any reference to his father's position because he believed that earning things was the foundation of understanding things, and that he wanted his son to understand the world he was going to inhabit from the inside rather than from a position of inherited advantage. He said the school had been part of that education and he was grateful for what the academic program had provided, and he was not grateful for what the social environment had provided, and he intended to have a full and specific conversation about the second thing. Dr. Calloway said he was deeply troubled by what the footage showed. He said he was going to take immediate action. He said the students involved would be identified and the appropriate consequences would be applied through the school's disciplinary process. James said he appreciated that, and he had 2 additional requests. He said the first was that the consequences be substantive and that they be communicated to the broader student body as a clear statement of the school's values regarding how all students were treated regardless of their financial background. He said the second was more unusual. He said he did not want Tyler Ashford or any of the students in the footage to be told who his father was as part of the disciplinary process. He said he wanted the action taken on the basis of what had been done and not on the basis of who the target's father turned out to be, because taking action on that basis would teach exactly the wrong lesson, which was that how you treat people depends on who those people are connected to rather than on what those people deserve. He said he wanted the lesson to be the right one. Dr. Calloway looked at him for a moment and then said yes. He said he understood. He said he would handle it that way. The meetings with the students and their parents happened over the following 3 days. Tyler Ashford was called to Dr. Calloway's office on Wednesday afternoon. The meeting included Tyler, his parents who were contacted and who came in on Thursday morning, the vice principal Ms. Davidson, and the school counselor. Tyler's father Richard Ashford arrived with the specific manner of a man who has spent his career being the most powerful person in most rooms he enters and who has not fully processed the possibility that this room might be different. He arrived with an expectation of managing the situation that was visible in the way he sat and the way he addressed Dr. Calloway and the way he produced from his briefcase a notepad and a pen in the specific gesture of someone who is preparing to take control of a meeting. Dr. Calloway showed him the footage. He showed it without preamble and without apology, and Richard Ashford watched 12 minutes of his son's behavior over 2 years, and the notepad stayed closed and the pen stayed capped, and by the end of the 12 minutes Richard Ashford had the specific expression of a man who has understood something about his son that he was not prepared to understand and who is managing the understanding in real time in a room full of people. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "What happens now?" Dr. Calloway told him. Tyler Ashford received a formal disciplinary notice that was entered into his academic record. He was required to attend 6 sessions with the school counselor over the following 6 weeks. He was removed from the student council where he had held a position for a year. A general assembly was held for the student body on Friday of that week in which Dr. Calloway addressed the school without naming specific individuals but with the specific directness of someone who is communicating a position clearly and who is not softening the communication for the comfort of anyone in the room. He said Whitmore Academy had failed in its responsibility to ensure that every student was treated with the dignity that every student deserved, and that the failure was not only the failure of specific students but of the school community, and that the school community was going to address it structurally and not just individually. He said the scholarship program was not a charity program. He said it was the school's recognition that excellence existed everywhere and that the school's responsibility was to find it and to create the conditions in which it could develop. He said any student who treated a scholarship student differently because of their financial background was treating the school's own values as a joke, and he was not willing to have the school's values treated as a joke. The room was very quiet when he said this. Several students looked at the floor. Several teachers who had been at Whitmore for a long time and who had watched the social dynamics of the school across those years said afterward that it was the most direct thing they had heard a headmaster say in a school assembly in their experience. Marcus was not in the assembly. James had asked that Marcus be allowed to attend his regular classes and that the process be handled without requiring Marcus to be present at any of the disciplinary proceedings. He said his son had been present enough in the situation across 2 years and did not need to be present in the resolution as a participant rather than a beneficiary. Dr. Calloway had agreed. Marcus sat in his mathematics class on Friday morning while the assembly happened and Mrs. Harrington, who had been told the full situation by Dr. Calloway on Wednesday afternoon, taught the lesson with the awareness that the boy in the third row who was following the calculus problem with the focused intelligence that she had written about in his review was the boy who had been sitting in that dining hall on Tuesday and who was sitting in this classroom on Friday unchanged by any of it in the way that his teachers had always known he would be unchanged by it, which was to say entirely himself. James met Marcus outside the school at the end of the day on Friday. He had parked the car around the corner from the main entrance the way Marcus had asked him to because Marcus had said he did not want the other students to see the car and to change how they thought about him because of the car. James had smiled when Marcus texted this and had parked around the corner and had waited. Marcus came out through the main entrance and walked to the car and got in and they sat for a moment in the way of two people who have been through something together and are sitting with it before they talk about it. James said, "How was today?" Marcus said it was quiet. He said the assembly happened and he was not there but he had heard about it. He said Tyler Ashford had not been in the afternoon classes. James said yes. He said that was correct. Marcus said, "Did you tell them who you are?" James said yes. He said he had told Dr. Calloway. He said he had specifically asked that it not be part of the message to the other students. Marcus looked at him. He said, "Why?" James said because the lesson needed to be about what was done and not about who was affected and that those were different lessons with different outcomes and he wanted the right lesson to land. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said he agreed. He said he thought that was right. James said he knew. He said he had always known that Marcus would think that was right and he had wanted to make sure that the decision reflected that. They drove home and James made dinner and they sat at the kitchen table and they talked, not about the school or the assembly or Tyler Ashford, but about the calculus problem that Marcus had been working through in Mrs. Harrington's class that morning and that he had found a particular approach to that he wanted to explain. James listened with the full attention he had always given his son and asked the right questions and they sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours talking about mathematics and James thought about his own father who had sat at a kitchen table in the north end of Hartford and had listened with the same full attention and had asked the right questions and he felt the specific continuity of something being passed forward that had been passed to him and that he was now passing in turn and he was grateful for it in the way that you are grateful for things that connect you across time to the people who made you possible. The weeks that followed at Whitmore had the specific quality of a space that has been addressed and is adjusting to the address. The adjustment was not immediate and it was not total. Social dynamics in schools of that kind were built from years of accumulated habit and assumption and a single assembly and a disciplinary process did not dismantle those dynamics completely. But something had shifted in the school's atmosphere in the way that atmospheres shift when something true has been said clearly in the room and the room is in the process of absorbing the truth. Several students who had been in Tyler's orbit and who had participated in his treatment of Marcus by the passive means of watching and not speaking came separately to Marcus over the following weeks and said things that were awkward and insufficient and genuine. The specific combination of awkward and insufficient and genuine that young people produce when they are trying to correct something they have done wrong and have not yet developed the full vocabulary for the correction. Marcus received all of it with the same quality of attention he brought to everything, fully and without the performed graciousness of someone who is making it easier for the person apologizing or the punishing cold of someone who is making it harder. He received it as what it was, which was the beginning of something rather than the completion of it, and he responded to it accordingly. Tyler Ashford came to Marcus on a Thursday afternoon 3 weeks after the assembly. He came alone, which was different from every previous interaction Tyler had had with Marcus, all of which had been conducted with an audience. He found Marcus in the library in the period after the last class of the day when Marcus typically stayed to work before taking the bus. He sat across from him at the library table and Marcus looked at him with the same quality of attention and waited. Tyler said he wanted to say something and he was going to say it badly and he was asking Marcus to hear it anyway. Marcus said, "Go ahead." Tyler said he had been watching his father since the meeting at the school, and his father had been different since the meeting at the school in a way that Tyler had not seen from him before. He said his father had come to his room on the Thursday evening after the meeting and had sat on the edge of his bed the way he had not done since Tyler was small, and he had said something that Tyler was now going to repeat because he thought Marcus deserved to hear it. He said his father had told him that the most dangerous thing a person with advantages could do was to use their advantages to make themselves feel bigger by making other people feel smaller, and that the danger was not to the people being made smaller but to the person doing the making, because a person who had to make others small to feel large had not understood what they actually had and was therefore not capable of using what they had for anything that mattered. He said his father had told him this and had said that the man who had come to the school that week had more than Richard Ashford had in the things that actually produced what both of them had built, and that Tyler should think about what that meant. Tyler said he had been thinking about what that meant since Thursday, and he was still thinking about it, and he wanted Marcus to know he was thinking about it. Marcus sat at the library table and he looked at Tyler Ashford for a long moment. Then he said he appreciated him coming. He said he appreciated him saying it without an audience. He said he had a thought to offer in return and Tyler was free to take it or leave it. Tyler said go ahead. Marcus said the thing his father had told him was true, and that the part of it that was most true was the part about not understanding what you had, and that understanding what you had required at some point actually earning something rather than receiving it, and that earning something was available to Tyler as an experience and he should consider seeking it out before too much more time passed. Tyler looked at him for a moment. He said that was a more honest thing than he had expected. Marcus said yes. He said he found honest things were usually more useful than the alternative. Tyler said his father had said something similar. Marcus said yes. He said it seemed like their fathers had arrived at some of the same conclusions through different routes. Tyler said yeah. He said he guessed they had. He stood up and he said he would see him tomorrow, and Marcus said yes. Tyler went. Marcus sat in the library for a while longer and then he packed his things and he went to the bus stop and he took the bus home, and when he walked through the door his father was in the kitchen and Marcus said today was a good day. James looked at him. He said tell me. Marcus sat at the kitchen table and told him. James listened. When Marcus had finished James said nothing for a moment. Then he said that Tyler Ashford might turn out to be better than the version of himself he had been performing, and that people who turned out to be better than the version of themselves they had been performing were worth knowing. Marcus said he thought so too. He said time would show. James said yes. He said time always showed. Marcus Cole graduated from Whitmore Academy the following spring with the highest academic average in his year. Mrs. Harrington wrote in his graduation assessment that he was one of the 2 or 3 most intellectually gifted students she had taught in 22 years, and that whatever he chose to do with the gift would bear watching. He was admitted to Yale University on a full academic scholarship, which surprised no one who had been paying attention and which surprised a number of people who had not been paying attention and who were encountering the full picture of Marcus Cole for the first time. On the day of the graduation ceremony, James Cole sat in the audience in the same suit and watched his son walk across the stage and receive his diploma, and he thought about a kitchen table in the north end of Hartford and a postal worker who had told his son that the best starting point for a genuine life was close enough to difficulty to understand it and far enough from despair to believe in something else. He thought about what it meant to pass that forward across a generation in a way that the generation receiving it could use it in the world they were actually inheriting rather than the world the previous generation had inhabited. He thought about worn sneakers and a duct-taped backpack and 2 years of paper bag lunches and a text message that said today was a hard day and another text message that said today was a good day and everything in between. He thought about all of it, and he watched his son shake Dr. Calloway's hand and walk back to his seat and catch his father's eye from across the room and give him the specific look that only exists between two people who have been through something together and who know exactly what the something was and what it cost and what it produced. James held the look for a moment. Then he nodded. Once. Marcus nodded back. Once. And that was all that needed to be said. If this story reached you tonight in the place where stories reach you when they are real, please share it right now with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video and subscribe to our channel for powerful, emotional, and true stories every single week. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from. And tell us this: do you think James Cole made the right decision? Do you think the 2 years were worth what they cost Marcus? And tell us, if you had a child with everything James had, would you have done the same thing? Tell us in the comments, because we read every single one and your thoughts matter to us. And if you think this story was powerful, Wait until you hear what happened when a janitor turned down $1 million offer and changed a CEO's life forever. You do not want to miss that one. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next story.